Stream back up, streamers. If you're still there watching, or if you left, no one. Yeah, that makes sense. Streaming now. Cool. Thank you. So for the streamers who didn't get to in the stream, finish explaining it really quick to people in class so they can take a break. So if you're streaming right now and you are paying attention, I'll just cover it really quickly for you. So what we added was the load books changed a bit, the state changed a bit, and a couple book, the main component that we're worrying about in this book's lesson. So you can see that in the state we added a title, an author, and a synopsis, which represent those three fields that we're hosting that form, right? So you can add a new title, add a new author. And save. Load books is slightly different. And it's just state, such as removing a book or a new book with ping or API server, send it back to us, okay? So you'll see in this delete book function, it recalls load books, which is going to reset state, and then naturally, because we're resetting state, we're re-rendering the component, and we can see our new books. Handle form submit. It's your typical submit. We event prevent default to keep the page and the page from reading everything, because we don't want that with the single page application on YouTube. Schema, the title and the author are required in schema, so unless we have those, we don't want to actually submit, because Mongoose is going to throw an error. It'll be really ugly. You'll have to try to handle it from the UI. It won't be very fun. So once we have those, we can go ahead and save the book, and then we're going to reload the books. If you scroll down to where it's actually used, you can see we actually have the form button, this handle form submit. The form is disabled when we don't have an author and we don't have a title. So following the same suit as the server and as the handle form submit function itself, just extra submitting something you shouldn't. Again, easy text inputs, they're named after the product is in state, and that's so this handle input can update them for you. Lastly, we go back to our map of book components, right, in that book list, and you can see we've added an on-click handler to delete the book by the ID of the book that we're currently on. That'll again trigger a reload, and everything's hunky-dory, and we'll see our new books list. So that's a quick explanation of what we changed. Not more code, but there's a lot going on now, but why? And we're about to make it even more, enhance it even more with the background. YouTube, I don't know if it's necessarily YouTube. I think it's really old, and I've been planning to up. So yeah, YouTube is actually, I think, better than Panopto most of the time, but my machine kind of craps out. It loses internet connection sporadically, which is probably what's been happening. New one, but you know, my wife's more frugal than I am, so I haven't gotten one yet. So streamers, when I get a new laptop, it'll be so much better for you. This won't happen anymore, theoretically. I'm probably talking to the void right now. Okay. To do for the next 10 minutes. So What time class over? 9:30? Yeah, it is. All right. Just make sure the stream is good. And sorry, my connection's bad because like I said when I was talking to myself, it was supposed to be to you, but I don't know if anyone's listening. My wife won't let me buy a new laptop, so I'll tell her you're all bitching about it, though. Maybe she'll let me do it. Seems good. You're on it, Trent? Okay. Well, we're just doing the assignment right now anyway, so 25 minutes doesn't much matter if I'm streaming or not. That's true. Okay. Seems to be all right. So the component is connected to the router. Well, here we're going to type router, we can add routers. This is just like router. And yeah. So the important thing about the router is it needs to be your parent component and everything inside of it needs to be routed. So what we have here. So how would you say, like, say I said route that you said route slash component route slash proton. Go ahead. That's fun.
So exporting quality is saying you're just exporting just one part of this. So you can only use like the people are saying exporting one. Otherwise, you have to either be like one or yeah. Yeah. Like, very happy. I know that the default function for something that makes you up all of the numbers find something and that's eventually going to ask how they want to look at it. And all I want to do is have it say, or if you like it, I think it's maybe just close request itself. Alright, that's before now you can tap or tap. Okay. How's everyone feeling about this? Out of 5? 0? This is a tough one? All right, we're going to give you 10 more minutes then, and then we're going to talk about it.
It's like a combo of components and graph. Everything on graph. Yeah.
Oh, you know,
Are y'all doing over here?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is it?
It's rendering.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
A couple of things about it. First of all, the right component is money. That's awesome. But doesn't mean that. Right at the basic end. So another component we should have. That needs to be imported from that
Show you an example of it's just something that we have to have. So you just import it.
Every path goes to slack. Never one thing. I'll tell you about.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and talk about this one. This was tough. Did anyone finish? No, no one finished. I'm not that surprised. Not to say I don't believe in you, but this is a really hard example, a really hard exercise. React routers have been nebulous, and reading through the docs of any of these things, unless you're really familiar with React, is kind of hard. Even if you know React, reading through it, sometimes you're just like, I don't know what they just said to me, because one thing you'll learn about developers as you get more into the field is a lot of them are really bad at talking to people, which means they're really bad at writing for people. They're good for writing like robots or something, I don't know. And so robots can read it, but usually you just can't understand it. It's like a math textbook, right? Has anyone ever actually read a math textbook and think, that makes a lot of sense? I don't think anyone has ever done that. I've never done that. So it's the same thing. We'll go ahead and we'll open up this router. Now the router is cool. It adds a lot of functionality to React that we did not have before. Go ahead and make sure that this runs. And I'll show you an example of what this router adds. So the router, that just zooms the content. That's a bummer. The router lets you do a few things. In this example, we added the slash books path, which just takes you back to the main page. So it's not that exciting, right? It's the same thing as the slash page. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, you're not really showing any extra content. But if you go somewhere really weird, it's not a path that we handle routing on these single page applications. They're called single page applications, right? They have literally one page, and that's absolutely the case even if you have a router. But the difference is with the router component attached to our React tree, we can easily say, hey, if the URL doesn't match something specific, you're going to render a different component. So let's go ahead and check out the code. So this, put it up. So the controllers, all that stuff, nothing's really changed. The meat of this exercise is right in here. This single component. And I hope that my stream is still up. It looks like it is. So that's good. Okay. So there's a bunch of things happening in here. And if you made it to even step 3, I'm very impressed because it is hard to wade through these documentation. So the first thing you'll notice is we no longer just have the fun div with a nav and books in it anymore, because what that's going to say if we just have the div with nav and books is always render the div with nav and books. And that's awesome. We want to see the books, but we don't always want to see the books anymore. We're moving on. Our lives have evolved. We've evolved, right? So we want to use a router. What do we got to do? First things first, we got to have a router. Now, the interesting thing is this router component's not actually called router, it's called browser router. But because we have this fun as keyword, we rename it to router, so we don't have to type browser router every time we want to use it. If I get rid of this, React will freak out because router doesn't actually exist. And you can actually see my editor has graded this out. It's kind of hard to see, but it's graded out because it's not being used anymore. So this is just an alias. If you're not familiar with them yet, basically trim down the name browser router to router because I don't want to type browser router every time I use it. Now, granted, I'm only using it once in the entire app, so it's just being lazy, I guess. But whatever, it makes the job easier. So everything in our entire app is wrapped in this router. Does it necessarily have to be that way? And the answer is no. We don't got to get into that right now. We'll get into it later. But the idea is if you have a section of your code that you want to change what is rendered based off of the route in your address bar, that stuff needs to be wrapped in this router. And so the entire app right now is wrapped in this router. Next thing we have is a div, and our div is just going to act as our container for the rest of the stuff we're going to render. That's it. That's why it's there. You need it. Next, we have our nav. That hasn't changed. We always want the nav bar to show up, whether we're on the no match or whatever. We want that nav bar header thing to kind of always be there. You can imagine you have an app with a menu, right? And you're going to have like an about us, a contact page, a home page, or whatever. That's always going to be there, whether you get a 404 or not. So again, we're just going to leave our nav. Next thing we have is this switch. Now, the switch is really interesting. It acts a lot like a switch in JavaScript, right? We're familiar with the switch. You can do switch on something, and then you can do case this, do this, case this, do this, default, do this. That's effectively what we've got. We've got the case of a path slash, we're going to render the books component. Case of a path slash books, we're going to render the books component again. Case of a path slash books with any arbitrary ID, we're going to try to render the detail component. And when we don't have anything, our default case, we're going to just render the no match, which is that 404 component. So it's very much a switch. And that's why they call it a switch, just to make it simple, I guess. The route components are where we render the individual components per route, okay? So again, not to beat a dead horse, we have a path of slash, we're going to render the books component. We have the path of slash books, we render the books component again. We have books ID, we render the detail component. But there's one key to this React router, and that is this exact. So the way the switch works is when a route comes through the switch the first time, what it tries to do is match the path with what's in the switch. Excuse me. It matches the path with what's in the address bar, in your URL, okay? So if your path is just slash, it basically says, does the path we have a slash in it? And the answer is always yes, right? Every address in your URL is always going to have a slash, whether it's home, index, nothing, right? Or it's slash books or slash pages or slash fun or slash great time or whatever. There's a slash in it. So if we don't have the exact, you're always going to hit this component, this books component, because the path matches slash. And we have no idea what's after that. It could be an ID. It could be some arbitrary identifier or something, right? Who cares? But when you add the keyword exact into this React component, what it says is, unless the path is exactly a slash, literally nothing else, it can only be a slash, don't render this, right? If it's a slash, I'll render it. If it's anything else, I'm not going to render this anymore because it's not exact. With slash books, same thing applies. If it's not literally slash books, I'm not going to render this component. I'm going to go on to the next case. If it is slash books, we'll just stop here. We'll render the books. Now, why this is important is you can specify variables effectively in your URL. Imagine we have slash, we don't have the exact, we just have slash books slash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we found slash books, so I guess we're at slash books. How do we tell the router to act differently when we have another slash? Well, if you have the exact, you can say, well, slash books goes somewhere and slash books slash something goes somewhere else. And this syntax right here, :ID, basically says whatever comes after the first slash books is our ID. And we can render it out in React as our ID as an actual route property, right? And so if the route exactly matches slash books something, slash something, doesn't matter what it is. This can literally be anything that's a valid URL. We're going to render the detail. And this ID here that we can pull from the route, which I'll show you in a moment, is literally what we're going to use to go get a book from the MongoDB. Lastly, there's nothing, we haven't found anything, we're going to do our no match. So let's look at the detail page, see if we can't see how that ID works. So we have our rect router. We already know the detail component is rendered inside of the router, and we have an ID. The router information is passed into your props by default because that component is actually rendered by the router. Right here, woo, we pass in the component. You get default props that just come with it. And there happens to be one called .match, which happens to have one called .params, which happens to have the name of the parameter you specified in your route. In this case, ID. It pulls that ID out of the route and goes and tries to find that book in the Mongo database. I could have made that : anything. It's : ID. I could have made it : Carson, : name, : ID, : book. It doesn't matter. It'll end up matching this. So if I had : Carson, I would have to do .Carson. If I had : book, I'd have to do .book, so on and so forth. The direct match with that identifier, that unique identifier that is literally any arbitrary URL string after slash books. And that's why exact is important. Without that exact, there's no way we could say, well, slash books or slash anything takes you to a totally different page, right? That's the gist of the router. It's pretty complicated. There's a lot you can do with the router. You'll be using this a lot in any real application. Your final projects, you'll be wanting to use a router for sure. Anything you release to the public, you'll be wanting to use for sure. Here's an example of a route with an ID, right? This could be a book ID. So it's good to learn a little bit how this router is actually working. You don't have to know in detail what's going on under the hood. Not super important. As long as you know how to render the pages you want to render and how to get information out of the URL after you've rendered that page. Okay? Any questions on this stuff? 5 on the router now. The ID can be literally anything. Any valid URL string. It needs to be prefixed with slash books slash. So this is where it gets confusing. my ID could be /book /////// and that'd be valid. Don't ask why. I don't know, but it is. So as long as you have /book/ everything after that's your ID.
ID kind of normal.
Yes, is ID a normal way of writing it? Yeah, totally. Because your URLs, a good URL scheme is usually to point to a resource, right? So on an API, we have a REST API, which is like resource exchange transfer or something like that. I forget exactly what it stands for. The idea is your endpoints, your URLs, you want them to match a resource. And in this case, we want it to match a book, right? So we're looking for a specific book. We're probably going to be looking by book ID. If you were to go to Amazon and look for a product, they might have similar routes where it'd be like /product or /electronics or something / some ID about the product. If you go to another e-commerce site, that's usually how they work. It's a nice best practice URL scheme. It's a good question. Cool. All right, before we leave, I'm going to just quickly cover the final projects. They have a little presentation about them. They're coming up. It's exciting. You guys are really far. You're super close. What do you have, like 3.5 more weeks or something like that? And then you're out of here. You're not going to show up 3 days a week anymore. You're going to have like 15 hours a week more time. But
I was going to say, they got, yeah,
I thought it was 24 weeks.
well, I think they have their final day on the
Of June?
July.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys have a lot of time left, but that's okay. I don't know what the schedule's like. Maybe you have time off or something, or I just can't do math. Oh, 4th of July, that's it. So that's going to cut out probably part of a week. Ah, I see. All right. So your challenge in this final project is to prove yourself. It's a good challenge, right? The futility of excuses. Insert quote or excuses here. Yeah. Your challenge is you have plenty of time to work on this. You have all the skills you need. You have a team of skilled developers, and you have experts willing to help. So you have all these people that you've been working with. I feel like I skipped some. Oh, I did. I skipped a ton. Cool. Well, this is the very end of the slides. We're going to start over. Maybe that felt wrong. All right. Okay, so you're almost there. We've learned a ton of tech over the course of the last 20 weeks, and you'll learn a little bit more as we go on. Not much, but you will. And so we have a bunch of stuff about the browser. We have API stuff. We have some dev tools that are really important, some server-side stuff. We have some really cool front-end stuff. We have all kinds of crazy things. And then you have some other algorithm stuff you're going to learn. You're going to learn another language. You're going to do a whole bunch of fun things in your last few weeks. But most importantly, you're going to work on this final project, which actually could turn into something really interesting. So goals re-examined. Everyone's got their own goals for coming to this course, right? Some people are like, I want to become a dev and work in dev. Some people are like, I want to be a DevOps person and just deploy apps all day. Some people just want to learn a new skill. Some people want to meet people. I don't know. It doesn't really matter why you're here, but you are. And as long as you know your goals and you're ready to try to achieve those goals, you're on the right path. So you didn't quite make your target. If you feel like you're behind or you're not quite getting what you wanted out of this course, now's the time to start talking to TAs, talking to instructors, talking to Jason and other people that are the facilities and the staff of Trilogy to see what we can do in the last few weeks to get you to your goals. It's been a long adventure, and everyone wants to get the most bang for their buck. It isn't cheap being here, right? So you want to get everything you can out of it, and we know that. So now's the time to start talking. If you need advice, you got plenty of people who can give good ones. So what's left? Final projects, of course. We have some computer science stuff, some design stuff. There's some lightning talks, some workshops, and then finally there's your final project demos and graduation. And those are very exciting times. No more homework. There's a small caveat, which is they're probably homework due right now. Yeah, so you got that homework. But then there's no other assignments. I don't know if they mean there's another caveat. We'll find out in the next slide. Oh, okay. No, there's not, I guess. So you still have homework due. Make sure that gets done. But there's pretty much no homework. It's just the final project, which is going to take all of your time. So there's some lightning talks, and these are not actual lightning talks. They're just colors, I guess. So whoever put this together loves colors. Never stop learning. So this is an interesting slide. I'm not sure what the point is, but the point for me to relate to you is what makes you successful in your career. How many people are here to actually become devs? Like, how many of you actually want to go start a software career when you leave here, right? So it's a good portion, right? All of us have that drive at some level to get there, or we really wouldn't be here, right? Even if it's just as a hobbyist. Really, the way to become the absolute best developer you can be is to be involved. Okay, I got far in my career because I go to meetups, I talk to professionals, I learn from people who know more than I do, and that really propels you far. Not only do you meet people, and then you can prove how inquisitive and passionate you are, that they'll just kind of sometimes give you jobs, which is the best of all cases, right? You're just like, hey, I need a job. I'm like, cool, I like you, let's hire. So like, sweet, it works out great. So part of that learning is getting out of the community constantly, keep up on your blogs, get some magazines, go to meetups, do all the stuff that seems really boring, but if it actually is boring when you're doing it, maybe you're not pursuing the right career. Because if you go to a meetup and it wasn't necessarily just a crappy meetup, because that does happen, okay? So if you walk away from one, it was boring, it could have just been really crappy. But you go to a bunch of meetups and they're all boring, you don't like it, think about that. If you go to a meetup and you walk away and you're invigorated and you're excited, that's good. You're on the right track, okay? And you should want to do that. You should want to go to those things. You should want to be part of the community. Unless you're just doing this as like a hobby or having fun, the best way to propel yourself further is to continue doing those things. And they take time. I get it. We're busy. It's hard to justify going to a 4-hour meetup every week, especially after you leave the class. But try to go to one a month. That's a good achievable target. They're on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, every day. Try to go to one a month, establish a connection and rapport in that meetup. Find one that's interesting to you, and that will only help you significantly. I mean, it's great. It's really what's done a lot for me. So where I jumped to, blah, 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 expectations. We expect whatever. You guys can really do a lot now. You have the full MERN stack under your belt. You may still feel new, and that's true. You're still new. There's a lot of learning, a lot of experience you still have to gain, but you have the skills, okay? At least you have the foundation to build those skills and to do whatever you want. Your project should have real value. We expect you to do lots of research on other applications and on the domain. We want this to be a serious project. We want you to know and report about the problems you're going to face, the problems that you're potentially going to solve, things your apps are going to do. We want you to, have some form of project management system, kind of really try to run this team like you would expect a real software team to run. You may not know what that's like yet, but just imagine. It's like any other team, really. There's tools to help you do it. And we expect you to dig deep into documentation and really learn a lot about the frameworks and the things you're bringing to your project. If you're going to use React, which all of you are, learn about React. Take that time to learn about React. Learn about other libraries like Redux or MobX or something like that bring extra value to your React applications. Learn a little bit about, connected components in your state trees. Learn a little bit about how you could use MySQL and Mongo database, or how you could use something like Dynamo on AWS. Learn about how you can deploy to AWS. Learn how you can deploy to Heroku. Really dig into those the tech stack that you're going to use, because this project can literally turn into something. There are going to be some people there to view your projects that could potentially be hiring. Depends on, how good Jason does bringing people in, right? So, get on him about it. But really dig into that stack. Learn it like the back of your hand, because it's only going to be valuable to you. Moving on. Requirements. You must use React or Angular. I recommend React. It's my bread and butter, but Angular is cool too, I guess. You must use Node and Express Server. Why would you use anything else? It's great. Use MySQL or Mongo with Sequelize or Mongoose. Having those in there is great. If there's another package you can use to extend it, like another type of data store, maybe Firebase or something, just to add an extra oomph to your application, then great. I recommend use that too. You must have both get and post routes. You'll probably want to have delete and patch and put routes too. If you're going to build a full app, you're going to have more than get and post, right? That's like minimum requirement. Must be deployed to Heroku. I know when I was grading these, if someone deployed to AWS, I would have been shocked because that is a enormously difficult task when you're just jumping to AWS. So it depends on who's grading, I guess, at the time, but I would think that's a valid requirement too. You must use at least 2 libraries, packages, or technologies that we haven't discussed. You must allow for or involve authentication of users in some way. So that's the login page. You must have a polished front-end UI. Your folder structure must meet MVC paradigm. I would scratch it off the list. Personally, I would say just have an organized folder structure because MVC kind of sucks. You must meet good quality coding standards. This is really important. When I went through the cohort and I was helping to teach our students, some people just really did not latch on to the fact that formatting is absolutely key, the first step to readability. If you don't have good formatting, your code is pretty much impossible. So you're going to help yourself, you're going to help your teammates. Honestly, do what you want. Talk to your instructor, talk to Robbie, talk to your TAs, make sure the idea is good, make sure that they're cool with it, and run with it. Deliverables, deliverable number 1, July 2, you need your plan, design, and research. Number 2, July 9th, you need a ready MVP. There's going to be mini presentations. July 16th, I'm sorry. You're going to need a polished project. And then finally on July 27th, you're presenting your final project to everyone and anyone who decides to show up. This is a longer slide set than I thought, so I'm going to rush through really quick, but we'll post it so you guys can get to it if you want to see more. Because, yeah, what's up? This might be wrong. Don't quote me.
2016.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 2016. None of us read that. Apparently, they haven't updated this for a while. So I have no idea when the real deliverables are due, so ignore this. Okay, so basically your plan, you need an overview of your application, why you feel it's valuable, blah, blah, blah. These are details. Does anyone want me to read through these now? No. No? No. Great. We'll post this. You can look at it. Any questions? Great. That is up to Robbie. Do you guys already have a plan? It'll probably be self-choosing. Usually you can choose. You can be by yourself if you want, but that's highly discouraged because that is not really feasible. But you could do it.
Quick note on that. So when you guys are choosing your teams, if you choose to go solo, that's fine. But I really, really suggest you actually get integrated into a team. We had a couple students do solo projects. Every cohort has a couple that do solo projects.
That do solo, yeah.
Someone went on a job interview recently that did a solo project. Hiring manager asked why she chose to do a solo project, and actually it ended up costing her the job she took. So they were not impressed that she went solo because they were concerned about her ability to work within a team. So when you're in a real job, you can't choose your coworkers. You get dumped into a team. Probably not like whatever. If you're not a team player, that's literally the most important thing for a business is culture fit. More important than skill set, more important than anything is literally culture. You can't get along, you can't work, there's no use. Not even the best player.
That is a fantastic point. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. For the streamers, Chris was saying that picking a team and actually working in a team is far more valuable to future recruiters than working by yourself. Because you're going to be working in a team in any real job unless you happen to start your own company and never hire anyone, I guess. So, which is not scalable, right? You're not going to make a ton of money doing that. So, yeah, go ahead and pick a team. Are you required to use React for your final? The streamers are asking. React or Angular? I say React, but go nuts if you want to use Angular. Any other questions about the final projects or anything? Obviously, you can post questions in here. Saturday we can talk. You guys have plenty of resources to start getting this stuff done. Any other questions before we take off? Otherwise, you guys are good to go. I'll see you Saturday.
One last note. So if you guys run into a problem and the app doesn't come together for whatever reason, right? You get into a team, things don't work out. Better to fail as a team than succeed as an individual when it comes to getting hired. As long as that failure, you take away some lessons on why it failed and what you can change the next time around. It's going to go a lot farther with any hiring manager, any boss, any entrepreneur wants the guy who stuck it out with the team, didn't quit, and he showed up and failed, but has a game plan for next time. There's a guy who can't work with anyone.
I'm reading a book. Again, to play off that is a fantastic point. And in the book, they quote another book. And in that book, they said, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. I think that summarizes the point. It's a good point. It's very inspirational. All right. Have a good night.
I think that mostly to do with like
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Because like you're never tested in easy times.
Yeah.
Like
No.
a person's never tested in easy times. So